So Gordon and I are happy to welcome Jane Leavy to the podcast. And Jane, if you don't know, and you've lived under a rock for a bunch of years, was a Washington Post sports writer and covered some baseball teams there. Wrote a book that Gordon will talk a little bit about in 1990 called Squeeze Play, and also has written what most of us feel is the definitive biography of Babe Ruth called The Big Fella. Before that, she did Sandy Koufax, A Lefty's Legacy, and she did Mickey Mantle in 2010, The Last Boy, at the end of America's childhood. So, Jane, we're so happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome, and congratulations on your latest book, which is Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball.
And how to fix it.
And how to fix it. Right.
How to fix it.
And that's a big
by the way. I'm sorry, got interrupted. That's bad.
Oh, no. I was just saying that's a big part of it too, because anybody can say, "Hey, make me commissioner," but I actually like to go going through the book. There's a lot of interesting things in there. I can't wait to talk about them.
Let's go.
So, go ahead, Gordon.
Oh, I was gonna say, well, just so that I thought one of the most interesting things was through reading this book and then kind of looking back at your legacy. I came across what was your first novel all the way back in 1990, a year after I was born, called Squeeze Play. I know, I just had to throw that in there, but
thanks.
I thought it was interesting going from what that book was, which was a dramatization and a narrative sort of retelling, not necessarily strictly of your career as a beat reporter, but talking about what it was like for a woman working as a beat reporter in a very male-dominated field that was known as baseball. And so you go from there, giving a portrait inside something that I think a lot of people don't know about to now today. You're saying, hey, make me commissioner. We've come a long way from back then.
I bet Rob Manfred has gone in some locker rooms with naked men. I bet, but I don't think he would write about it.
Unless they paid him.
Well, I don't know. I know he's basically a golf guy, and I'm a baseball guy, as it were. I'd like to pass for a baseball man because I think that that's the ultimate compliment you can pay anybody in the world, but I'm not a man, so I can't be a baseball man. Baseball gal.
Well, let's talk for a second about Commissioner Manfred, because we all read the same things that, those of us that are unhappy with his performance, if you will, feel like he might hate baseball. And do you think that that's the case? There's a two-part question. And he's an attorney, obviously. It seems like that seems to be very important to being commissioner. Do you have to be an attorney now to be commissioner of baseball? Because I don't think you are.
No, I actually think you have to not be an attorney to be the commissioner of baseball. It's a huge business. It's a $12 billion business, and it's vast, and it's become corporatized, if that's a word, and it's become one where the old families who used to own franchises and pass them down to their kids and who are very invested in the cities that those franchises were in, except for the O'Malleys, thank you very much, are basically gone, and they're owned by Zions of corporatedom who don't want to be known for like making a small part in, I don't know, a motor engine or something, and so they buy a team because that's a lot more fun. How much they care about baseball, I think, is much more of an issue. I don't know whether Rob Manfred hates baseball. I'm going to say so. I doubt it. I feel sorry for him every time he gets booed at the draft after every draft pick, like it's his fault who got picked. This isn't all Rob Manfred's fault. It took a lot of years and a bunch of decades to mess this up. And it took, some of what I like to call the great need of the human mind to somehow put itself out of business and not assert its prerogatives when it was needed and when it should have been done.
So we were having a conversation about the commissioners in baseball, and it kind of feels like ever since they originally brought in Judge Mountain Kennesaw, to bring him in to clean up baseball back then. think the owners at the time really understood what they had brought in at that point. And they're like, oh, we've given up some of our control to this outside party. And now they've spent basically every decade since then making sure that that's never going to happen again. They don't want the commissioner to be able to do that kind of stuff.
They needed Kennesaw Mountain Landis. That he was a federal judge in Chicago. He had a rod up his you know what. Um, and and he set about creating an office that had enormous power. And the scandal of the 1919 World Series and Shoeless Joe, it was a big deal. And so that it was a necessary corrective. Either they had to go all in and do something insane and say, okay, it's fine with us, no problem, have at it.
Go
And
ahead.
I have to say, my attitudes towards gambling in baseball are not, do not come from a self-righteous place. My father's father was a bookie and a rum runner in Upper Manhattan, and his maiden place of business was the Polo Grounds. And so, to wit, my father became the water boy for the 1927 New York football giants, descending from Coogan's Bluff to the great green sward of grass below. Um, People think mistakenly, I might add, that other important things happened in 1927. No.
There's a singular moment of importance.
Morton Levy became water boy for the New York Football Giants. Um, you know, there's always been gambling, and other sports have figured out a way before the legalization by the Supreme Court in 2018, to have it happen and not have there be, a big, the word simus? Does the word simus mean anything to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Whatever you got it. A big to do. Um, as my friend Dan Okred, creator of Rotisserie League Baseball and thus fantasy sports and thus the gambling on fantasy sports, as he said, they didn't really have a choice in 2018 or 19, whenever it was legalized. But to do this, they do have a choice what to do with the profits, which are ample. There's only been one estimate. It was presented to them in a lobbying meeting, and the New York Times reported this, and a great series about gambling and sports, where industry lobbyists twisted MLB's arms by saying, just imagine how much you can make, and you can make money off not just selling your data, which they have done. They sold it to a company called Sport Radar or Sports Radar, which then disseminates it to sports books all over the country. But they also then bought a stake in Sports Radar. So they're making money on both ends. And it was projected back in 2018 that they would make $1 billion. Nobody said, is that every year? Is that every decade? Is it every Friday? I mean, there's no specifics to be had, but I do have some projections in the book by a guy who knows this stuff far better than I do. I think the issue is that in abandoning its historical status, despite having the sign in every clubhouse, "Thou shalt not bet," it was one more very visible way in which baseball stopped being baseball. And I can't I can't help but think that that was a PR issue. I think that's alienating to people who might have thought, wow, gee, I thought they were really against this. And it's also a problem, as you guys well know, because players are now getting threats, death threats, as a result of people losing bets because they struck out 5 guys rather than 4.
And that's the wild thing to me is see players go like, okay, at least, I can I've seen players talk about like, I can kind of understand when I have a terrible game, I go 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. I'm mad at myself. So when you get those threats, it's not like I'm understanding. It's the games where I went 2 for 3 with 2 home runs and I have people getting mad at me because I caused the other team to lose. It's like, doing my job out here. It's hard enough being a pro baseball player, and I have people being mad at me because I'm good at my job.
It also breeds fans who are not really fans of the game, but fans of the action. And that loosening of the ties to really caring about what you're watching, um, it just creates a very different relationship with the game. So my solution is that they take some large part of that chunk of money, however much it actually adds up to, and use it to create sports academies in every major league city because God knows we need them. And why shouldn't American kids, specifically, underserviced populations of Black kids, Hispanic kids, poor white kids, whoever they are, who can't get access and can't afford the training that's become de rigueur. And baseball's become a country club sport. It costs more for a parent to have a kid doing travel ball and perfect game showcases and all that than it costs to play football and basketball as a kid these days. So build these academies. Remember that line? You build it and they will come. Yeah, I think they would.
And actually kind of it's so true because I remember when I don't know, when I was a kid playing high school, playing baseball in middle school and high school, it was the cheap alternative to all the lacrosse kids. The lacrosse kids in our town, they would spend a fortune every year. So you had to buy all the pads, all the sticks, all the gear. Plus, like they were doing all of that. I just was like, oh, I go out and buy a glove and I'm set for the season. I don't even sometimes buy a new one between seasons. And so it's changed so much from that where only the people that were actually scouting and getting accepted to college were even thinking about getting invited to a showcase. Now every kid on that roster, even if he's kind of serious about baseball, is getting private lessons. They're going through these throwing drills, they're going to these showcases trying to increase velocity, and it's become this entire cottage industry sort of on top of baseball where we're pumping money into developing kids and over fist. It feels like
And Major League Scouts show up. If there's a showcase, there are Major League Scouts there. And what that
somebody's
is that those kids are going to uh, they get basically one swing, one throw, one pitch, whatever it is. They run, I don't know, what's the race? They 50-yard dash. I don't know what they run. They run a race, and that's basically it. But the problem with that is it creates a culture in which all these kids are trying to throw 95 miles an hour, when they're 13. And this is nuts. The percentage of kids getting Tommy John surgeries, in before they enter the draft, before they enter puberty. My God, it's ridiculous.
when I was pitching in Little League, I remember there was a lot of conversation of, we're not going to have you throw curveballs until you get to 13, just so that we can protect your arm. Now it's just like, hey, let's have the kid get Tommy John at 13 so he doesn't need to worry about it when he gets to high school, which is like, where have we come with this?
And I blame Little League Baseball a little bit for this, by the way. And so the old guy in me, like, when they started televising all the Little League games and all that kind of stuff, I think, really, we need to televise like regional Little League tournament games? But then everybody's watching these kids, and you can see these kids throwing curveballs. And so if you're 8 or 9 years old, and you're watching a 12-year-old throw a curveball, you're going to naturally want to do that because you want to be on TV and do all that stuff. So they're promoting this, get there sooner, do this stuff, independent of how it might, hurt your body in the long run.
There's research from a guy I really trust, Glenn Fleissig, who is the biomechanist to the stars. He runs the American Sports Medicine Institute in Birmingham. It was started by him and under the aegis of James Andrews, who was, along with Frank Jobe, of course, they're the old guys. Andrews is still alive. Jobe, who performed the first Tommy John surgery, of course, in 1974, I think September 1974,
74, yeah.
Is long gone. But Glenn has research that says curveballs actually are not the thing that kill you. I was like, what? I
Well,
was always,
that was a revelation for me in the book, by the way, because well, let's take that, right? You talk about Glenn, you talk about what he discovered, and about, without giving anything away, and because I saw make the ball a little bigger and a little heavier, not a lot, and counterintuitively, right? And I wrote about this. It's coming out later. It's like this is what's, it actually stopped the pitcher from injuring themselves as much because it was a little bit. And I was going through, and I cited this in an article come out later this week, Jane, and mentioned saying, well, what if? And I told Gordon, what if the bats were heavier? Like, what if you had a 35-ounce bat or a 36-ounce bat mandated? You couldn't do a lighter bat, so they couldn't get around on those fastballs. Then would the pitchers naturally ease up and throw a little bit easier? No, pitchers are mercenaries, man. They're gonna keep throwing it as hard as they can. That's not gonna work. Jane's right. It's got to be the ball. It's
I
probably.
think it does have to be the ball. I mean, there's another argument to be had, and I'll come back to Glenn in a second. My friend Pekko Hosoi, who is the co-founder of the MIT Sports Analytics Lab, and she is an analytics babe. I mean, she's an analytics diva. She's also an incredible human being, and she is a great teacher who can put this stuff in words for people like me.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things she argues is, everybody's like, well, we have to get the balls be the same. They all have to be the same, and the atmosphere has to be the same. So now they have to sit in, things that look like Airstream trailers.
Humidors, yeah.
Yeah, humidors. And she said, maybe it's not so bad that they're not all the same. Because after all, the great argument about baseball is that great players adjust. So wouldn't the fact that it's random would depreciate the impact of analytics because you can't
Right.
predict it. And also it would, make the greater players greater because they're the ones who are most likely to be able to adjust to it. So maybe you just leave them as they are. But Glenn, who is, basically dedicated his life to trying to make this sport safer, um, and these guys are they're what's the right word? It's very poignant because they're just so upset. They see this happening to kids over and over and over. So that they've tried all sorts of things. One of the things Glenn did, and I thought this was so cool, he wanted to find out whether the UCL, the ulnar collateral ligament, is in proportion to the body it resides in. So here we have the human race producing bigger, taller, stronger guys who then pump iron and make themselves stronger yet. So are they born with, bigger UCLs? And the answer is no, they're not. And Glenn found this out by buying, ready? I didn't know you could do this, but he bought 20 arms, dead arms and his shoulders and arms. And he, pulled out the UCLs of all these young men, the dead young men, to see whether the little Tommy John ligament, as he likes to call it, is bigger if you're bigger. And the fact that it's not proportional tells you, well, so you're now 6'7" pitcher and you're 230 pounds and you're launching your whole self into that. So the
Hmm.
stresses on the UCL are a whole lot more than they used to be when Spud Webb was, you know, was on the mound.
And I always remember. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say
No,
like
no, go ahead, you go.
I was gonna say because like one of the things I remember talking about is like throwing a baseball is one of the most unnatural things we as humans do. There's no range of motion in which pulling your arm back like that
I
and have it
disagree.
firing.
I disagree completely.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, if you, I don't, I stupidly forgot to put in an index, so I can't give you a page number. But one of the physicians who works with Glenn and who
Mhm.
created the internal brace surgery in 2013 is also in Birmingham. And he studied under James Andrews. Um, and what he said is basically that the motion of, the layback position, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we can talk about how much, force is generated by that. but that's no different than throwing a spear, right? That's the
Yeah.
same motion that who, I mean, I don't know what movie has big armies throwing spears, or
Right.
some caveman trying to kill, dinner, right?
Yeah.
The difference is they weren't throwing off a mound. The movement is natural. It's the mound that's not natural. And
Huh.
so, because you're throwing down, and that's the difference. And so if you're just throwing out, some people advocate, have no mound whatsoever, throw from flat ground, see what happens to the game. Eric Burns, actually, the Gadfly Burns,
Hmm.
recommends that. But that's the problem. And what Glenn found out is, so the little Tommy John ligament is kind of about an inch thick. It's not, it has to be able to stretch and bend, but it's not, like the newspaper around your, sorry, the rubber band around your newspaper. It's more like the ones that go around the claws of lobsters in the tank so that they don't claw you on their way into the boiling pot of water. And once you think about the size of that thing compared to the size of the people throwing them, it really isn't very complicated to figure out why there's a problem. When your arm is in this layback position, there's a great painting of Sandy Koufax in LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum. And it's in his face is squinched, and his arm is all the way back. I mean, that's not so natural. But when it moves forward in the socket, it's traveling at 65 miles an hour. That's the rate of speed that this is happening at. So I think he said it's like holding 12 5-pound bowling balls. And then when you come forward, it's like people pulling on your arm, 200 pounds of, pulling. I really should have an index because I'm sure I'm messing up the numbers here. Pulling forward. So it's a violent motion, and repetitive motion. Why do people get carpal tunnel? Repetitive motion,
And now we've got these crazy big athletic bodies doing these athletic motions harder than they've ever
Right,
done them before.
exactly. And the big change was that Kyle Bodie at Driveline, when he opened up for business and started, researching and stuff, he was able to show that your velocity, your velo, is not a fixed thing. It's not like everybody always said you were born with 90. No, you maybe were born with 90 before you started training at a place like Driveline, where they can up your velo by having you throw with, heavy balls and throw at walls and do crow hops and throw as hard as you possibly can, and it's gotten infinitely more sophisticated. I mean, the reason that pitching is so whacked out is that Pitch FX, which was the first tracking system, um, came into. I mean, it was pretty much complete in 2006, but it was uh, installed and went full time, I believe, in 2008. It was either 2007 or 2008, and I'm going to write this down before
Yeah,
my.
yeah, no, it is around there. You wrote that, yeah.
And so what that meant was guys like Kyle Bodie and other stat heads who existed inside their computers, spent years figuring out what to do with all that data, and it became what's known in the data world as scrapable. They left the URL unprotected. And these are the guys running baseball. But it meant that pitching and pitching coaches and in their, boutique labs where they're, producing lab rats who throw baseballs for a living, had a way head start on hitters because they only got that kind of information um, was starting with StatCast in 2015.
They almost had a 10-year head start on being like, hey, we
Yeah.
can now track your pitch. Before it was like, you could train, you could long toss. Now you can point to a guy and be like, do these activities and throw in this fashion, and you'll add 6 miles an hour onto your fastball. And
Right.
hitters, I'm sure that's why hitters were all of a sudden like, it was kind of how we felt as fans all of a sudden, where it's like, where did this army of guys that all throw 95 plus mile an hour? So like, those used to be fireballers in the
Right.
major leagues. Now that's like a requirement to be a pitcher.
Right, exactly. And there are some basic limits in the world of humanity, and one of them apparently is the size and strength of the UCL. So having found that they didn't get bigger, and that evolution has not produced a bigger, stronger UCL to go with our bigger, stronger pitchers, Glenn did an experiment with a bunch of minor leaguers and college pitchers and tested 4 balls. One that was the same size as the current baseball, but an ounce heavier. One that was the same as one that was 5% bigger, but the same weight as the current baseball, and then one that was 6 ounces. I mean, you get the
1 ounce more, right? It was 1 ounce more, and
right. One
a little.
ounce more, and when he tested them, what they found out was that the bigger, heavier ball actually lowers the torque. That's the force that's generated on this thing here on my elbow. Mine is, you know what it means to me that my UCL is the same as Sandy Koufax's? It's like, wow, I have something in common with him. He found that it actually reduced the stress. You can't throw it as hard, right?
Well, and that's the key thing. You can't throw it. So what we're saying is then that no more 95 might be 91 or 92 or whatever it falls down to. And I asked baseball players this question. I asked Ron Darling this question. I said, do you really think today's major league pitchers can get out major league hitters throwing at 85, 90%? And Ron, of course, being a great pitcher that he was, like he demurred mostly and said, nah, "I don't know," Which I said, I didn't say this to him then, but if they could, they would, but they can't, or they don't think they can.
No, 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 no. I disagree. I don't think it's about that they don't think they can. I think it's a question of what they get paid for,
That's true.
and what they get drafted for. And if one day all of major league owners, all 32 of them, stood up and said, you know what? We don't want to destroy another generation of baseball arms, so we're going to change this now. We're not going to encourage or tolerate, max heave and go, ooh, ooh, ooh. There were so many. I mean, I saw Otani throw 11 100-mile-an-hour fastballs in 3.2 innings. I mean, it's like, okay, fine. It didn't even look like it phased him a bit.
And
But
it
but at some point it gets to be too much. So if they draft and develop pitchers who are, um, you know, who know how to change speeds, who, who rely on location. Remember that word, location and command and all those things that nobody talks about anymore. There are other ways to attack it. Mike Rizzo, when he was still general manager of the Nats, said, change the strike zone. If you bring it down a little bit, make it a
Yeah.
little bit wider, they can't throw up under the hands with a 100-mile-an-hour sinker. I always find the idea of a 100-mile-an-hour sinker to be amusing. But, up here where they can't hit, where they can't get to the ball, if you lower it, they're going to be able to make more contact. And if you're going to make more contact, you're going to have more guys trying to hit for contact. And the pitchers bitched and moaned about it, which is how they ended up with the formula that they're going to use when they install the Robo Ump challenge system next year.
Well, I mean,
and
how do you feel about that? That was good. That was one of my questions.
Didn't I anticipate that well?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Um, one of the funniest parts of this book for me was I was invited to go to Polar Park, which is the home of the Woo Sox, the Red Sox AAA team, and it was built. It was the last collaboration between Larry Lucchino before his death, and he, of course, was the guy who built
Yeah.
Camden Yards and then rebuilt Fenway and Petco Park with the help of Janet Marie Smith, who has been prettifying and perfecting Dodger Stadium now for 10 years. And I was invited. I said, I was real clear. I was really upfront. I said, I want to go see, the system. I want to see what they're working on. They were testing it there. Oh, sure, sure, no problem. You can come in. Lucchino had painted the words Taj Mahal on the door in bright aquamarine, aquamarine door. I think it was red and yellow lettering Taj Mahal. And I go in there and I can't see a thing because of the computers and the way they were positioned. So it wasn't like there was some big secret that was going to be revealed, but I got thrown out after maybe half an inning. Oh, we're not showing the media this, and I'm like, what do you think I am
What am I
seeing?
That's
gonna
what I'm
say?
here for.
I mean, it was hysterical, and there were 5 challenges. They were using the challenge system, which they did on weekends then. And I did get the count. There were 5 challenges, and 3 the umpires were right. One was registered too late, and one the player was correct. If I remember my own words well enough.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, wow, there's a secret, there's a state secret we have to protect. So I went and sat in the sunshine and watched the ball game. And there were all these guys, trying desperately to get back to Bobby Dahlback was in that game.
Right.
Dusty Baker's son was in that game. He was playing because it was against the Nats AAA team. It was, and they put together a really good AAA park. It's a lot better than the one that was in Pawtucket, though. I would say that the game where the 33 inning game low
I was
cap
gonna say, but
should have
Pawtucket
been
will always have that
preserved.
game.
Yeah. So
You, you
I
also,
so I don't mind the challenge system. I think that the problem with all of us, and I don't mean just you know baseball, is if technology exists, people feel you have to use it. You don't. You can say it turned out not to be good. It's like a drug. It has bad side effects. Okay, we're not going to use it. We're going to take it off the market. But it doesn't work that way in sports. And I would suspect in most industries. If you build it, they will come. And that's the problem is there's how do you make those judgments about what you've created and whether it's not just viable, but whether it's good for you, whether it's good for the game. And I found that the most reflective guy on this that I spoke to, and that gave me great hope for the future, is Morgan Sword, the executive vice president of Major
MLB.
League Baseball, um, who talked really lovingly about the game, and about his dad and the Mets, big Mets fan at 86, looms large. But Carlos Beltran is a family no-no. But he talked about, the living in an era of thinking you can know everything. And maybe you just can't, or maybe you don't need to, or maybe it's not good to know everything. It's a it's a it's a uh, it's a search for a kind of control that I think is, should be the road not taken. Frankly, I
That's
don't
that's
think it's
it.
that interesting.
That's
You
really
can see
interesting
that.
because
I was gonna say you can.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say what you're saying.
I was going to say, as a as a tennis player, and a fan of tennis, I watched what tennis did over the years, with calling lines, and the human eye can't see the ball hit the line at the speed at which the ball is hit. And so they went to the incremental challenge system before they basically dispensed with it entirely. And so as a tennis player and a tennis fan, the game has lost a little something, right, by not having any of that dynamic about challenging a line call. That basically the ball is in, the ball is out, and then they just go on to the next point. So you could argue it's all about the tennis, but that's not the only reason. That's why you watch the game, right? And that's the same thing in baseball. It's not the only reason. Does everything have to be right unequivocally in order for it to be a success?
Right. And what do you lose when you lose arguments with umpires? I mean, Jim Joyce was great on that subject. The problem is that the theater of baseball, the entertainment value, and the recognition that that is part of the job of athletes and coaches and owners, is a big problem, because the efficiency driven movement to make everything, um, you know, more mathematically, to base everything on probabilities, um, exacts a cost. It isn't necessarily better that there's no managers kicking dirt in umpires' faces. I personally miss that. And Jim Joyce said, he missed that. It's the place, it was like the last place where there could be theater. One of my favorite people in the book is Rich Hill, the now 45-year-old lefty who pitched briefly for the Royals this year. I think it was his 14th major league team, tying Edwin Jackson, I think.
Yep, yeah, yep.
And don't see, I know my shit, right? I know, I know most of
Yeah,
it. Okay.
yeah, okay. We knew that before.
So, um, he talked about how he used to milk situations for the drama, because there's no allowing a dramatic moment to build, to let the tension build, because now we've got the clock. And a pitcher, he said he would step off the mound, he would step off the rubber, and look around, and let a moment theatrically reach a climax before he would go into his motion. And he thinks of the strike zone as a canvas to be painted. And, oh, I could use a little red here. I'll just put a little dab of red right there. You know, I I think that the basic tension in baseball today is between art and the idea art and entertainment and precision and efficiency. And the balance has gone way, way too far in my view towards towards efficiency. I never found efficiency entertaining. Did you? I mean,
I mean, speaking of, we're Met fans. We just watched the alumni game this weekend, and they reference back. Speaking of manager moments, one of the more iconic manager moments I can think of in modern baseball, which was Bobby Valentine coming back into the dugout wearing his disguise, hiding from that. It's pure showmanship. That is pure theater meant to entertain the fans more than anything else. And it is clearly hugely entertaining, because we're still here talking about it 25 years later about what a magical moment in a sense that was. And I think having those fun kind of things. Was it Lou Piniella that came out and took the second base out and threw it halfway across the infield one time in the middle of an argument? Those are memorable baseball moments that, if you continue to strip away from the managers what they're able to do and their authority over the game, they're just sort of guys that walk out and hand out the lineup cards now. They're not anything close to what we used to think of as managers, back in the day, where there are these leaders of their teams.
but Buck Showalter memorably called this the castration of the
Yes,
American manager.
yes, yes.
What a
You,
guy. I just want to say, if the Mets pull a Phillies 64, which I think they're in the process of doing.
It sure feels that way.
Bring back Buck.
Bring back Buck.
You
Yeah.
think that sloppiness would exist on the Yankees or the Mets? If Buck Showalter was in charge? No way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Buck was dismissed rather unceremoniously in our opinion, and through nothing that he did or didn't do, just like your time is through. So I wanted to ask you, and you cover some really great things in the book, and we could talk for hours because you detail the Cape Cod League stuff, and it made me wonder, when you go to a Cape Cod League game even now, is that baseball the way that we wish it were in terms of the purity of the game and just for the game's sake? And that experience for fans is very different. And I'll contrast that because you write detailedly about the Savannah Bananas and Jesse Cole and how that's impacting baseball, because that is the anti-analytical approach to just having fun and going out and playing a game.
Well, the Cape League looks like what baseball used to be. And you sit on a grass hill, at least at the Orleans Firebirds field in Orleans, Massachusetts, where there are no seats. You just bring a blanket and sit on the hill. Um, and it allows you to believe that nothing has changed. But in fact, major things have changed. For example, the name of the Orleans Firebirds, who were Cardinals until Major League Baseball, in its litigious wisdom, decided it would be important to insist that every Cape League team use Major League merch if they had a Major League moniker. Now, think about it. I mean, it's like, okay, that means that your choice was to dismiss the local merchants who had been supplying them the Cardinals t-shirts for 30 years. And I mean, it was crazy. All they could see was the dollar and the precedent.
And protecting the brand. They think they're protecting the brand, right? This is what they tell
Right.
themselves. They're protecting.
Exactly. And as opposed to thinking, well, maybe this will make some Cardinals fans happy in St. Louis, or maybe it'll encourage some of these people to become Cardinals fans. So, the Red Sox, there's a Red Sox team up there, and they couldn't change their name because they're the Red Sox. And the Mariners didn't have to change their name because they preceded the Seattle Mariners. This league has been around for a long time. Um, the manager, though they're called coaches, head coach Kelly Nicholson uses the shift. It's not illegal in the Cape League now. And I said, why? He said, well, I want to win. So, okay. Um, and the other thing that's happened is that by changing the date of the draft, it's really messed, and with the portal of the NIL money, it's really messed up what players they can get, and what, they all have agents by then, and agents will, like, run them up there for like a day to just get a look-see because of all the scouts that are gathered behind home plate. So the days of there being a team that stays together through a Cape League season are they're gone. I mean, one team, 2023 or 2024, Katuitt, lost 40 players. The Firebirds only lost 19. And Katuitt is the place where Jesse Cole, creator, founder, evangelist of the Savannah Bananas, had his moment of, walking to Damascus or whatever, where he sat on the bench in Katuitt and said, "I'm bored." To which I replied to him, "Lots of people are bored in Katuitt. There's
There's not a lot to do there.
not a lot to do in Katuitt." I'm going to get myself in trouble with the forefathers of Katuitt. But the Bananas have issued a challenge to Major League Baseball, and it was based on Jesse's very brilliant and I mean, I don't need to say and smart, brilliant understanding that baseball had lost its way in this issue of entertainment, that people want to love baseball. I think they really do. They just want baseball to love them back. I said that to Morgan Sword. I think it's even in the book. I said,
It is.
that's what I've learned. He said, "Are you a writer?" Yeah. Um, so he isolated that, and now he's taken it to extremes that I find, I don't want to watch banana ball all the time. I really don't. I
No,
don't want to see the bananification of outfield play with people doing flips. I don't want to see the pitching staff breaking into a break dance on the pitcher's mound, nor do I want there to be a clock that starts at the beginning of each game. Um, but I do think that he understood that the main thing that had to happen to make the Bananas successful, and the main thing that Major League Baseball needs to do to bring people back to the park, is reinforce what is now an almost non-existent relationship between fans and players. So maybe the most pivotal thing I saw in my bananadom, and I was following the spaceman
yeah,
around for a good time, a good piece of the time. There was a party animal. The party animals are the guys in
of the other
Cape.
teams. Yeah, yeah.
They're the Bananas first foils. Now there are two other teams, and there are going to be two more next year. And this party animal climbs in the stands and he sits down next to this little boy. This is in West Palm Beach during spring training, just at the beginning of spring training. And he hands the kid a pen and he says, "Will you sign my jersey?" Right? Now, in that moment, in that exchange, and the reversal of roles, this kid goes, "You want me to do that?" It's saying you're important. It's you matter to me, right? I mean, if you look at the Bananas jerseys, sometimes you'll notice that they look dingy, and I didn't realize it. It's because they're so covered with ink. It's a thing that they do. And their assistant head coach, a recovering lawyer, Adam Virant, was there with me, and he looked at me and he said, "That kid just became a baseball fan."
Right, right. Right, and I guess my wishful thinking is that the Bananas will put a little pressure on Major League Baseball with a labor agreement coming, because let's face it, if they do have a lockout and there isn't a season in 2027, this
I know, I
Speaks
know.
I
such
have to say it. I
terrifying
have to say
things.
it. That now for some people that's going to be enough, right, to go to banana games, and they're going to be able to go into all the ballparks and play these games, and they'll have a couple of sellouts, and that is, look, I look at banana ball as like Chicago style pizza, right? It's pizza, but it's not pizza, right? They should call it something else, and you can enjoy it, and it can be good and people can like it. But when somebody says, "I'd like a slice of pizza," they're not thinking Chicago style pizza. And they're, banana ball is fine for my daughter, Gordon's sister, who, yeah, let me go to a 2 hour game. I like baseball. She's in a baseball family, but she's not going to, the games all the time. She's not going to, that's an experience, a 2 hour experience. And for a lot of people, that's going to be sufficient. That is not who we're talking about when it comes to fixing baseball. And I know that's not what you meant when you talk, but you have to look at that as this is part of the environment.
I think you don't have to do what Jesse Cole does, and nor am I recommending it, but you do have to think the way Jesse Cole thinks. And I think Major League Baseball has neglected and presumed its audience for far too long. They make it too hard to find games on television. I mean, I was in I have a house up in Massachusetts. I was in Truro on the Cape, which is how I got so involved with the Cape League.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't watch the Yankees Red Sox games up there. Couldn't for, I mean, and I have every package, because believe me, I can write them off. I have every package. There was no, I mean, let's make baseball findable. I
Yeah,
mean, and accessible.
yeah,
I-
yeah. We
And
talked about how YouTube broadcast an NFL game, last week, and basically, if you have YouTube, you could watch the NFL game. That's what we're talking about. A place, okay, I know where I can get the game. I can go to
right.
YouTube. It's always going to be there, and I'll figure out how to connect to it. And baseball is so far away from getting to that point. They're not on the doorstep of fixing this problem as much as they like us to believe that they're, Commissioner Manfred, that we're going to get this done.
Well, the problem is, and I am going to toot my own horn for 1 second. My favorite part of this book is the long chapter, which starts out in Cape Cod, which traces the history. How did this happen? Because that was the question I started out. What happened? And it turns out that the guy to blame, chiefly, other than Dan Okren,
I thought it was Dan, actually.
yeah, I told him, anyway, is this guy, William Holbert, who was one of the, you know, fathers of the National League, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And, to get the rowdies who were owning and organizing baseball teams, such as they were in the 1880s, he had to give them something in exchange for uniformity of schedules and rosters and this and that. And what he gave them was territorial marketing rights in perpetuity. Now, there wasn't a hell of a lot of that in 1885 or 1888. But that grew into radio, and even at the beginning, there wasn't that much money. A sponsorship for radio, not such a big schmear. But, and then even television at the beginning, not so much money. But when cable came in and, that the whole system of RSNs or regional sports networks came in, Major League Baseball did not somehow foresee that geography, even as they keep expanding into smaller and smaller markets, that was going to produce a league that was fundamental, it's wealthy but unhealthy. It's the haves and the have-nots, and Roy Eisenhart was a brilliant guy and I've known him since the 1981 baseball strike when he saved my butt on deadline. He said the problem is, by the end of April that half the teams are out of it. They may make a nice run in June or something, but they're not winning anything. And so what's the incentive to go see them? The amount of money that the Royals make from their TV rights, so they're now part of that MLB collective, I think, it's like about 45 million dollars a year. The Dodgers with Spectrum Charter or Charter Spectrum, whichever it is, 8.3 billion dollars over 25 years. So it's not fair. It's really just based on geography, and it's a very thorny problem because you're asking rich people to give up something, and rich people don't like to be told how to spend their money, and they don't like to be told they have to give some of it up. Now, in truth, they have been giving up money ever since the end of the 94-95 strike, when they created the luxury tax, in which the haves, give to the have-nots based on how much they spend on free agents. But the problem is there are owners who take that money and don't do what they're supposed to do as it's set out in this collective bargaining agreement. They just keep it, pocket it. And then you
Cool.
wait to go through a grievance process. And the grievance process, there's still grievances pending from 2018 and 2019. So why do the players not trust the owners? Yeah, they have every reason not to trust them.
And with all these RSNs, Kyle, I was going to go back in terms of growing the game. If you're a kid and maybe you want to be a baseball fan, but your parents aren't, Well, guess what? Your parents probably aren't buying the RSN to watch the Dodgers, especially if they don't have the money. So you get maybe one game a week that's on public broadcast television if you're lucky and they do that in your market. So a lot of young people that might end up being baseball fans can't even expose themselves to the game in the same way because they can't just turn the TV on one night and watch a baseball game.
Right. That's a really good point.
And the NFL. Look, we talk about the America's pastime. The NFL is exploded in popularity. It's more popular than the former American pastime, which is baseball. And baseball seems to, just be casually going, well, we're not going to lean into, the legacy. I think you wrote the collection and collation of baseball's numerical present and its past made it different from the other sports. And I love that line in the book because I think that we as baseball fans don't. And I'm a big history guy. We don't appreciate the fact that baseball has the best, the longest, the most rich history, and being able to take it back to 1876 and even before that, and put a line in that. No other sport will ever be able to do that.
And the irony is that the collection and collation of all those numbers starting way back when is what made analytics possible.
Yes. Yes.
Talk about being hoisted by your own petard, right?
Yes.
You were talking about it before. It's like I think if baseball could create a stat, a pure stat that if you just looked at this one stat, you're like, oh, this will tell you everything that you need to know. In one fell swoop, we would finally have the stat we've always wanted, and we would remove all of the magic from the game. Like we would want something that could predict everything that could happen, but then it wouldn't be fun to watch anymore.
Well, the Joe Torre said in there, they're trying to make an imperfect game perfect.
Perfect, right.
And that's sort of what Morgan Sword was saying. All that analytics can do is tell you what the probabilities are. They can tell you what's going to happen or likely to happen 9 times out of 10. They can't tell you what's going to happen in that 10th moment because it hasn't happened yet. And you don't know whether the wind is suddenly going to pick up or a ball's going to hit a pebble or Tony Kubek's throat or, or the sun is going to get in Willie Davis's eyes in Game 4 of the 1966 World Series. Or that Rajay Davis, who hit 12 home runs in 2016, is going to, man up and hit one in the 7th game of the 2016 World Series. So you can't, that's what makes baseball
That's why we
priceless.
watch.
Fun to watch. You don't know, and I mean, you do know that the Yankees can't field.
Yes, we know that. We talk about that all the time.
But I have to say, the
It's
Mets
very
are,
fun.
you know what? The Mets not so good either lately.
The Mets are, as Met fans, hold my beer. We talk a lot about the Mets on our podcast, and we know there's some people, Braves fans and Philly fans that are going, he. It's fun to watch Met fans suffer, and we do. So
my dad was a Mets fan, and because he, National League fan from the Giants to the Mets, and he's been dead since 2003. But while he was dying and waiting for surgery, I entertained him by reading him game stories about the Mets. So this would have been August 2003. And they had just played some horrible game. I can pretty much, I haven't done it yet, but I should go back and get the stories because I know what the date was. And as he was wheeled into surgery, he looked at me and he said, "Oi, the Mets."
and that is what it's like being a Met fan.
Yes.
This year, as much as any other year.
Okay, what's wrong with the Mets? Can you tell me what's wrong with them?
I don't know if it's any one thing. I have said that some teams, and I do believe this in baseball, you have an it factor sometimes where the team meshes together. For a team to be 0-64 coming back after 8 innings, that is definitively not the it factor. And so the mojo isn't there. Sometimes seasons go like that. I think the culture probably has to change as much as they thought they could take this together with the pitching staff the way they did. Clearly that didn't work, and the genius, which looked good for about 69 games, wasn't really genius at all because I think they're playing kind of the way they are.
And one of the things we've talked about, at least, is that, among the Mets, they have a really good lineup when you look at the top hitters in the lineup. Lindor, Soto, Nimmo, Alonso. But with the exception of Soto, and even him to a certain degree, all of the top hitters in the Mets lineup, including guys like Vientos and Alvarez, are incredibly streaky players. They're guys that'll have 2 week stretches where you can't get them out. Lindor can be like that. Nimmo can be like that. Alonso can be like that. The problem is that you have the flip side of that is where they have a 2 week stretches at a time where they just literally can't get on base. And when you have a whole lineup filled with guys that have that kind of streakiness to their games, it leads to these periods where they'll go weeks where they as a team they just don't hit. And you watch them just go, oh, it's another game where we're in the seventh inning and the Mets have one hit.
Uh, I became a Mets fan in honor of my father, and I hated what they did to Buck. I just hated it. I understand that, everybody wants to hire their own guy, and that's not just in baseball. But the lack of continuity in that franchise is notable. And
Inconsistent.
uh, whatever happened to the trumpet guy? You
Oh,
know,
Timmy the Trumpet.
yeah, where's the trumpet guy?
He's there. He's there. Edwin Diaz has had a good season, and Timmy the Trumpet has probably been the only consistent thing for the Mets this year.
Okay, and this is horrible. I apologize. Who is the player who with the "Oh My God" song?
Oh, that
Oh,
was
that was Jose Iglesias. They got rid of him. They let him go. They let him walk
You
after
want to
last
talk? You
season.
want to talk about getting rid of your mojo?
right.
Right.
Right. Right. We don't need you. Harrison Bader is another guy where, gave the Mets everything he could last year. He wanted $10 million. So the Mets, well, maybe we can shop in the discount aisle. Steve Cohen's team shopping in the discount aisle. I don't understand that. We'll bring in Jose Siri, and he'll be the guy that will platoon with Tyrone Taylor for center field. And then Harrison Bader took great pleasure in the at bats, had the highest average against the Mets of any player during a season in the history of Mets baseball. He just destroyed the Mets everywhere. He played for two different teams, killed them, and sort of serves them right for basically, ignoring the mojo side of a guy who, when the guy plays, he's excited, he's into it in a way that this looks like a bunch of sleepwalking guys right now, for the most part. So
Do you think it's about Soto?
I think it's part of it. I do. I think that Soto affected Lindor's ability to figure out, am I the team leader? Well, now we've got this guy who's being paid $765 million. I thought I had a big contract. His is twice my contract, and so maybe I'm not the guy. I feel like he lost his leadership sort of edge there. This is my opinion.
It's interesting. One of the things I started working on this in 2021. I did my first interview with Jim Palmer that year. And I guess that was right after Lindor signed his $341 million deal, which was right after, is it Manny Machado had signed?
Machado had the same similar number, yeah.
Yeah, but it was $1 million less than Lindor. And Jim's going, why? Why did he have to do that? People tell you that the union says you have to push it and you have to always get more in order to continue the riches that allegedly trickle down. I don't see that they trickle down so much anymore. But it is alienating. Um,
Yeah.
and then look at the Brewers. I mean, they're the most fun team at the moment to watch in baseball.
That is mojo, right? That's the opposite side of the coin.
And I don't think it's an accident that Council, who left for gazillion dollars, is succeeded by the old guy who's, feeding reporters tacos on the sideline, like Murphy did the other day. Um, and it was clearly built with the old-fashioned idea that being a team matters. That all those little things that you can't quantify. My friend Pecco said, everybody's coming to us now. They want to know, can we measure grit? How do you measure grit? She said, well, there are things you can do. Bill James said, well, you could put, you could see who comes in early. which players come in early? Okay, and then somebody
I
else
like
said,
I like the
then you'd have to put cameras in every locker room. That'll go well. Um,
Yeah, they'll love that.
but
you made reference to Dusty Baker when you're talking about scouts, and Dusty basically telling you that, looking at the player's eyes to determine if he's got it. Nuts and guts, I think, are the words that were used.
yep, nuts and guts,
And
which
and
you
I
got
think
from Schembechler.
right, and I think that's important. Like that you're taking away the idea that you can look at a guy and you can know where he's at, and analytics won't tell you that.
Um, my my children are adopted, and when my daughter was born, um, she was in she was in Arizona, and we were about to fly out to pick her up, but we wanted her to be seen by a pediatrician before we got on the plane to go. Um, and so I got the pediatrician on the phone, and he said, "Do you know horses?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Oh, well, when you look at a horse, you look for the shine in his eyes." And he said, of my new baby girl, she's got a shine in her eyes. And, that stayed with me forever. There are guys on clubs who have a shine in their eyes, and who,
A winning ball player.
winning ball player, right?
I think
Exactly.
I think I think that's what we're talking about, and analytics take that away. Well, Jane, we could talk to you, and I hope we get a chance to talk to you again. Maybe you've written about Yankees, and you've written around Dodgers, so maybe you'll write about the Mets one day. Although I'm not so sure that I feel that coming from you. Um,
David Stearns is the son of a friend of mine from high school.
oh, that's very juicy. That's
No,
very juicy. The book is "Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It." It's already a bestseller, and it's been
it
out
is.
for about 20 minutes.
It's a bestseller. Is it really?
Yeah,
Where?
I think it's already at the top of the bestseller list, and I saw like, yesterday, I believe.
Could you send that to me? I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah,
seen
I'll
that.
find that.
Um,
Um, but
I think a lot of people in baseball thought somehow this was going to be a hatchet job. You know, Buck said to me, "I think you were really fair, much fairer than I'd be." And it's a love story. I've been in love with this game forever,
that comes through.
and
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. It really, you can tell reading this book that I think that's probably why it doesn't come off as a hat job, is you just love it too much to do that to the game.
yeah, and like I said, the problems that exist, the really fundamental problems that exist, were not created by Rob Manfred. And it's you can argue about whether he's managed it well, and you can take his ghost runner and stuff him. I hate the ghost runner. I hate the idea that a lineup built to slug is suddenly supposed to play small ball in the 10th inning. Couldn't they have found out the same thing I found out, which is that 75% of extra inning games end in the 10th inning or after the 10th inning? So
Right,
you're legislating for a problem, at least that doesn't exist right then. And as Roger Angel, the late, dear, wonderful, perfect baseball writer
writer.
for the New Yorker said, can't they at least wait till the 13th inning, let them go through the lineup one more time, let baseball end the way baseball is supposed to end? And for God's sake, Roger didn't say this, I'm saying it. If you got to give somebody a free pass for something, at least make it to first base.
Right. Right, and we completely agree. I mean, we'll say that I don't think anybody really gets a lot out of a 17-inning game necessarily. So you want to do it in the 13th inning and put somebody on first base to try to move it along. That's fine. It's a tiny percentage of games that'll be played out of 2,430 game season. You want to feel like you did something to save a few arms. That's fine. But yeah, this is silly, and just to keep doing it because we made the change is weird. Right? I don't understand the rationale. So
Well, it has to do with travel and how far I mean, it is a grind to fly all over the country. It's not the leisurely world of locomotives that, you know, allowed Babe Ruth to run naked through through a passenger car, chased by a guy with a knife, which of course had to do with a woman. You know, I understand that that those are considerations, but you know, that's also the reason that you can't go to a ball game anymore when the gates open and see your guys hit, because now the home team hits first. And it was Davey Roberts who said to me, switch it. It's a small change, but a really
Great
significant
idea.
one. Yeah, I
Great
agree.
idea. Great idea. I think that's, that's bringing it back to the fans, by the way, because they want to watch batting practice, and the chicks still dig the long ball thing. Still happens even if it's in practice, before the game. I think people like to watch
Yeah,
it over the.
so I will say, and this is my last statement on this subject, that people swooned at the All-Star Game home run derby because Kyle Schwarber hit four
Oh yeah, the
batting practice pitches for home runs, made me nuts.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
know, and if you ever see it in a real baseball game, then I'm done with baseball.
Yeah. 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 That'll be too. No golden at bats. None of that kind of stuff.
oh no, please no.
Thank you.
Yes,
We'll
thank you so
definitely-
much.
Good luck with the book. We know it's going to be big. We loved it, and we go out and buy it, everybody. And thanks again. We hope we can have you back on the podcast another time.
I'd love to. It's great talking to you guys. And send me that story. I haven't seen
I'll find it. I promise.
it. Okay.